Hey, good morning, friends. Happy Sunday. Thank you so much for being here this morning and joining in our virtual community. And who would have thought after 10, 11 months that we would still be in this mode of communication? I'm just thankful that this has been available to us. And I don't get tired of saying that because I want to remain grateful. I want to remain appreciative of the blessing of being able to do this. I'm sure there are many, many churches and Christians around the world that would love to still be able to connect, but can't simply because they don't have the technology to be able to do it. And so I'm thankful that we have the opportunity, and I'm thankful that we've been able to stay connected this way. And those of you who have stayed with it and just been here every week, I thank you. Sometimes it's not always easy to do that. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes it just kind of feels like, oh, I can't do another screen. I can't do another Zoom. And I get it. It is exhausting. It's just so important, though, that we stay connected somehow, stay in some sort of Christian fellowship community. We need that. We need that in these days. And so, thank you for being here this morning. I hope you're blessed. I hope you hear from the Lord. I hope you have an opportunity to grow. I hope the Word teaches you something, that this is a good morning for you. I do want to acknowledge, though, an elephant that is there, and that is, as probably most of you are aware, that Michelle and I are going to be moving on and transitioning to a new church. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened, and it's not really a juicy story. It's just a few months ago, Pastor Jeff offered me a new position here at the church. And so Michelle and I began to think and pray, not just say yes, but to think and pray. What's the right thing to do? What is best for Redwood Chapel? Am I the right person for this role? What's best for our church and our fellowship? So we began to pray and think about that. And around the same time, another church in the area reached out to me and said, we'd like you to consider being a part of our team. And so for the last few months, Michelle and I have been praying, fasting, putting before the Lord this this decision. What are we going to do? What is best for the church? What's best for our family? And it wasn't until recently that we came to the conclusion that the Lord was opening a door for us to move on and to begin something new. And that is exciting for us, but also very sad because Redwood Chapel has been a very, very good, safe, nurturing home for us for the past 14 years. And we were so delighted to be able to come back here in 2007 and start our family here and grow and do so much and be a part of so much that God was doing. And but we've come to the end of that chapter. And as sad as that is, we are thankful that we have been a part of so much that God has been doing, part of your lives, part of that you've allowed us to be a part of your lives, that you've been a part of ours. It's just this beautiful community that we have been blessed to be a part of. And we are thankful for this season and this chapter. So that's that. And here's what's going to happen. Over the next 3 Sundays, we're going to still continue to be in this community here at 9 o'clock in our Together class. And Michelle and I prayed, and we thought, what would be a great finish? What would we love to look to in the scriptures? Because in whatever season that we're in, whether it's a good season, a difficult season, our first place should be into God's Word. What does God's Word say to us in any season? And Michelle and I have always loved the story of Ruth. It is one of our favorite stories in the entire Bible because there's so much in the story of Ruth that speaks to who God is and how he cares for us. And so for the next 3 weeks, we're going to go through this story. Maybe you've gone through this story before, maybe you never have. But I invite you to look into it and to discover the richness of who God is. A couple of things, though, that are coming up, just so that you are aware of them. Today we have our service at 11, and we want to invite you to that. It's going to be a great time out on the patio. Can't wait to see you there. We have our all-church family virtual meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. That's going to be on Zoom, and there's a link on the Church Center app, and you can also find that on the website. And then finally, this next Wednesday, we're going to be gathering for an all-church prayer gathering and to be praying and beseeching the Lord as we ought to be. And this has kind of been a wonderful pattern for us the first and third Wednesday of the month. So I want to invite you to be a part of that. If you have your Bible, open them up to Ruth chapter 1. Ruth is in the Old Testament. It's right after the book of Judges. And it is a short 4-chapter story that has a huge punch of God's character and God's provision. As you're turning there, I want to ask you a question. What do you love about God? Like, when you think about who God is and his character, what do you love about him? What comes to mind? What excites you? What brings you joy when you think about who God is? When you think about his forgiveness or his tenderness or his righteousness, his grace, his mercy, his generosity, his love, or his kindness. We worship what we love. We worship as a people. As human beings, whether we're religious or not, Christian or not, whatever, we all worship something. And what we see in the scriptures, and even what psychology teaches us, is that we worship, we give worth, what we love, what we value most. And as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we worship God. We worship him because we are drawn to him. We believe that he is best. We believe that he has the greatest value, that he is the most important thing. That's where our worship comes. That's what drives us to not just sing songs, but to commit our entire selves to him. And one of the things that we're going to see in this book is there is a word that describes so much of the character directed at God. It's a word I'm going to bring up here called chesed. And it's used a few times in the book of Ruth, and it's used throughout the Old Testament as well. And it's an Old Testament word. It's an Old Hebrew word that means love, graciousness, kindness, mercy, generosity, not forgiveness, but it's all of the positive attributes that can be directed towards a person are really wrapped up in this one word, chesed. And there isn't really an English word that translates. And so oftentimes you'll see it in the Old Testament translated as kindness or loving kindness. And so when you see that in the Old Testament, or even when you see it in the book of Ruth, you can just do a quick word study on the internet and find out that that's what this word is, chesed. That's how it's pronounced. Well, let's look at Ruth chapter 1, and let's look at this amazing chesed of the Lord in this incredible story. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. Now, just briefly, this story takes place in the time of the judges. And the time of the judges can be summed up in actually Judges chapter 21, verse 25, when it says, when the writer of Judges says, "In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit." Now, I don't know if you've read the book of Judges. It's a difficult read just because there is so much lawlessness and chaos going on in the nation of Israel. It is definitely, people are living according to what they think is right. And this story of Ruth happens during that time. And it says there was a famine in the land. There was no food, no food, there's no Safeway, no Uber Eats, no nothing, no food. So it says, so a man from Bethlehem, which ironically the word Bethlehem means house of bread. There's no house of bread in the house of bread in Judah, together with his wife and his 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab, which is a historical enemy, thorn in the side nation of Israel. Verse 2, the man's name was Elimelech, which means my God is king. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And Mahlon and Chilion, their names mean sick and dying. which is, you'll see why that's ironic in just a little bit. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now, this is extraordinary because Israelites would not normally, and this is true for the ancient Near East, ancient Near Eastern culture, you would not go and move to a new country unless there was extreme circumstances, which we see here. But for an Israelite to move to Moab was almost like a sign of giving up, almost like a, there's no hope for us. God's not going to take care of us. God can't take care of us. We're going to go to our ancient enemy, Moab, and live there, even though all the stories that we tell our children about the Moabites, and you can read about in the book of Numbers, it's awful, but we're going to go and live in the nation of Moab. This was a big deal. Elimelech leading his family out of Israel, out of God's country, but out of the promised land into enemy territory. This is huge. Don't miss that. This is a big deal. There's incredible implications for this, as we will see. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They married Moabite women, which, was a no-no, Deuteronomy 23. These Israelite boys marrying Moabite women, not okay, but they do it anyway. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. And they had lived there about 10 years. Verse 5. After they lived there 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her two sons and her husband. Naomi has been completely emptied. You have to understand that in this culture, in this time, there were no kinds of safety nets and securities that we enjoy today. We have things like insurance, we have Social Security, we have unemployment, we have there's different kind of welfare that is available to us if we run into hard times. There's churches, there's organizations that give. There's all of these safety nets in our culture, in our society, that would rescue us in a place like this. They are zero of those things, and now Naomi is basically destined to be living destitute, poor, and on the fringes of society. Naomi has been completely emptied. Her security is gone. She has nothing. Let's keep going. Verse 6. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, because God doesn't abandon his children, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her two daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. So all three are going to move back to Judah. Then Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness," there's that word, "to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye and wept aloud. Again, remember, husband in this culture means security. I know for us living in 2021, we think, oh my gosh, what a patriarchal society, how horrible this is. But just get rid of the outrage for a moment, just so you don't get lost in what's going on here. Again, in this culture, that's what it meant. Without a husband, you did not have security, okay? Just save your outrage for later, okay? Then she kissed him, and she's saying to her daughters-in-law, look, don't stay with me. This is going to be a horrible life for you. Go back to Moab, find husbands, have security, live your lives, start over. She kissed them, will you go back to your people? Verse 11, but Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you... Verse 10, we will go back with you to your people. That's what they say to her. Verse 11, but Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? Now, which I know this all sounds kind of gross and weird and again, totally foreign to our ears. But again, in this time, in this culture, these two daughters marrying in would need to have security. And so oftentimes there would be, if a brother died and his wife and family were left alone, another brother in the family or another male in the family would in some way kind of co-opt and adopt the family as now part of his own. Not that he was now having two wives. It's not like a polygamy kind of thing. He would just adopt the family to take care of them in a spiritual, familial sense. This family of his dead brother would then become his, and so there was a way for families to be taken care of. But because Naomi is older, she can't have children, and even if she could, what are they going to do? Wait around for 20 years? This is an impossible situation. And she says, "No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me," remember that word, "bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Don't blame Orpah. This was probably just on the surface a good decision. Verse 15, "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord," look how that word Lord is used there. That's the covenant name of God, Yahweh. "May Yahweh deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you from me." She's agreeing, that Ruth is agreeing to a life of poverty and destitution because of her devotion to Naomi, her incredible love and devotion to her mother-in-law. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. Twitter was a flitter, right? And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Right? The gossips are all going crazy. And listen, she says, verse 20, "Don't call me Naomi," she told them, "call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very the name bitter. The name Naomi means happy or pleasant. The name Mara means bitter. And she's saying, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because I'm bitter. My life has become bitter. I went away full, but the Lord, Yahweh, has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." She attributes her circumstances to God, which is interesting. Verse 22, so Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite. The author wants us to remember that. This is Ruth the Moabite. She doesn't belong here. She would stand out like a sore thumb. Her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now that last sentence there, "as the barley harvest was beginning," is this beautiful little kind of, at the end of an episode where there's a cliffhanger, right? And it just kind of gives you a little taste of something to come. That's what the author is doing here. The author is enticing us to keep going. But we're going to stop right there, and we'll pick up the story where it leaves off next week. What we need to understand is, again, ancient Near Eastern culture was so different from our own. It's agrarian, it's male-dominated, it's a shame and honor culture, it's highly spiritualized. There are no safety nets, and Naomi and Ruth are now have resigned themselves to be poor and destitute for the rest of their lives. And what ought to be seen here is that Ruth's devotion to Naomi is not normal, and nor was it expected. I mean, when Orpah left, we shouldn't blame her for doing that. We shouldn't say, "Oh, well, Orpah's the bad girl and Ruth is the good girl." No, Orpah took a very reasonable out for herself, but Ruth, for whatever reason, decided to stay. We don't want to read into the text. We don't want to say what her reasons were. All we know is that she stayed with Naomi. So here's some theological takeaways from the text. Number one, Elimelech demonstrated a lack of faith in God's provision. Elimelech, the father, demonstrated a lack of faith. He left Bethlehem. He left his country. He left his homeland, his ancestral spiritual homeland, for Moab. To him, his circumstances were bigger than God. Have you ever felt like that? Like your circumstances were just too big and prayer just didn't seem powerful enough. Communing with other believers just didn't seem like enough, like powerful enough, like it just wasn't, my circumstances are too big. God's not big enough to handle them. That is a lack of faith. That's not believing, that's not trusting that God is bigger. Now, we all have those thoughts at times. We all feel that at times, but Elimelech acted on his lack of faith rather than on faith. Another theological takeaway is that Naomi demonstrated where faith in God had led her. She says, I'm bitter because the Lord has made my life bitter. The Lord has caused all of these things to happen. God gave, but he also took away. This is an interesting but important theological concept to understand, that God does not just give, that at times God takes away, or God allows our circumstances to be difficult, even painful, even seeming like there's no hope and despair, for a greater purpose, for his purposes and his will, and ultimately for his glory and our good. There are countless examples of this in the scriptures and countless examples of this in our own lives. The problem is we don't have the same kind of foresight that God does to be able to see exactly why things are happening. We look at the here and now and we base all of our hope and trust in our present circumstances, sometimes forgetting that God is playing the long game. That God is not just playing the here and now, which he is, but also playing the long game. You know, Joseph at the end of Genesis has that great line to his brothers who are just falling down over themselves, like, we're so sorry, we sold you into slavery, don't kill us. And what does Joseph say? You meant something for evil, and evil certainly did happen to Joseph. But what does he say? But God meant this for good and the salvation of many. Right? Because of Joseph's position and all the evil that happened to him, all of the horrible things that happened to Joseph, he was able to save and rescue thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And so Naomi, I think, understands that. She's just not seeing the end game here, which if you've read the story of Ruth, you know what the end game is. No spoiler alert, but it ends well. We'll just say that if you've not read it before. But Naomi understands it's the Lord who's brought these circumstances into my life. And finally, third theological takeaway is Ruth has demonstrated what great faith looks like. Ruth has completely turned away. Notice she uses the covenant name of God. She says that your God may, when she says to Naomi, may the Lord deal with me, be it so ever severely, if death separates us. She's using the covenant name of God, meaning something has happened in her. She says, your God will become my God, your people, my people. What is she doing? And again, we can't read into the text, but she's clearly demonstrating what faith does. It leads you into difficult circumstances. It leads you through hard times that you don't have control over. That's what faith does. It says, I trust that God knows what he's doing. I trust that God is aware and in control. I trust that he's good, that he has a chesed love for me. What I love about studying the scriptures is we get to see the whole picture, which is great for study, but let's just let's remember to put ourselves into the place of people who didn't have the whole story. Ruth does not have chapter 2, 3, and 4, or the New Testament, or you know what I mean? She doesn't have all of it in front of her. She's basing off of what she's seen, and she's saying, okay, well, Naomi, you're going back. You're going back to Bethlehem because your God has provided. I'm gonna go with you, and I'm gonna trust. I'm gonna put some faith and trust in God. The main point of this entire first chapter is this: that great faith is not built on the temperament of our circumstances, but on the foundation of God's character. Right? Our faith is not built upon our circumstances. It's not built upon what's good that's happening now or what's bad that's happening now. Good and bad happen all the time. There is no way to measure when good or bad is going to come. I mean, sometimes we can see some signs and we can make plans, but ultimately we are slaves to the machine of time and things going on around us. But faith is built not on our circumstances, but on who God is. That's why it's so important for you and I to make sure we know who God is, right? I think a lot of times the reason why we wrestle in faith is because we don't know who God is. We don't really know his character. We haven't really taken a deep dive into the person of God. Well, here's some application for us before we jump into our discussion. Regardless of my circumstances, I can be confident in God's work and in God's will. Okay, I can be confident in God's work, what he's doing all around me, that he is at work, that even though something might be done for evil, that God is greater than my circumstances or my foresight or what I feel, that he is at work. If it's often been said that at any given moment, God is doing 4 trillion things in the world, and you and I might be aware of 3 of them. Not 3 trillion, 3 things, right? Uh, it, God is that powerful, knowledgeable, and aware, and able to deal with all of the things of the entire universe. We just believe that, and we know that, and we believe that we can be confident in His will. That the things that are happening all around us are leading to something, that are leading to an end goal. If you look at the scriptures, all of the scriptures, the Old Testament through the New Testament, are leading to what? Well, it's leading to that great assembly, the new Jerusalem, the new earth, new heavens, new earth, and Jerusalem coming down, and us being in the presence of God and Jesus, all the world restored perfectly the way it was always supposed to be. Everything is leading to that. And so we can be confident in God's will. Second, second application, seasons of hardship. Seasons of hardship are great opportunities for spiritual growth and maturity. And listen, for the last 3.5 years of this class, we've been saying that over and over and over again, that seasons of hardship are oftentimes the best times for spiritual growth. Why? Because it's in those times that we have to lean into the Lord all the more. When times are good, when things are easy, in fact, the whole book of Judges is things get easy and the people get fat and they are just and living a good life and they feel safe, and then they just fall off the cliff. And then they're taken over by their enemies and their circumstances, and then they're in a bad place and they have to cry out to the Lord. Now, that's not a good lesson for us on how to live our lives, but the point is that in those difficult times, that's when we realize how powerless we are. That's Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Oh geez, I apologize, but that's Paul saying, in my weakness the strength of the Lord is made perfect. And so it's in seasons of hardship that there are great opportunities for spiritual growth and maturity. And then finally, though it's not the safest, but the best place to be is in the center of God's will. I remember hearing the first part of that a long time ago, that the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And I get what people are saying by that, but let's clean that up and let's fix that, okay? It's not always the safest. I doubt that Jeremiah being rejected, the prophet Jeremiah, who was in the center of God's will, being rejected by the people, eventually cut in half, Paul rotting in a prison, Jesus hanging on a cross, those weren't the safest places, but they were the best places. They were the best places for people who are devoted to the King. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to end this, and we're going to jump into our Zoom discussion, and looking forward to having some good discussion with you. Thank you for being a part of this teaching. So we'll close for now, and we'll see you in our Zoom discussion. God bless.